Happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome into another edition of PTN Extra. As always, that's Mike Irwin. I'm Evan Camico. We are back. It is Tennessee week, Mike. It is the first week. That man behind you, Bobby Petrino, is back in the saddle at the Arkansas football program, albeit an interim, title. We'll get there. We'll talk Tennessee in a little bit. But let's talk about what's been pressing all of week, and that is the big news that broke Monday afternoon. Blueprint Sports and the University of Arkansas Athletics are cutting ties. They will no longer be working together, which basically means Arkansas Edge has been dissolved. It's over. It's done. That is effective on October 15th. That's the date that it officially happens. Mike, your thoughts on Arkansas Edge, Blueprint Sports, all of the above, and all the problems we've known with NIL for all these years?
Well, just more confusion about, and this started with the Little Rock Touchdown Club appearance by Hunter Yurachek, in which he said, well, we just don't have the money for football to be competitive the same way the other sports are on campus. And then he came back later and supposedly clarified that and said he used the wrong language and all of that. And then this thing broke out of Oregon State, where this company, what is it called? Blueprint Sports. Blueprint Sports had basically had a process where they collected the first $750,000, $800,000 they collected went directly to the athletes of Oregon State.
Yeah.
But after that, they were taking 60% of that. So people looked at that and went, well, wait a minute. Excuse me. Arkansas uses them. Looks like Arkansas is getting ripped off. And that sat around for 4 or 5 days while people boiled over that. And then all of a sudden, Trey Biddy writes a story, which he must have gotten from Yurachek, in which he said, well, Arkansas does use these people, but they got a different arrangement, and they're only getting a straight 17, 18% or whatever. And that's where it stood for one day. And then the next day, they're gone. So what does all this mean? To me, it means that there are people behind the scenes right now, boosters, board members, excuse me, I got something caught in my throat, board members who are basically saying, we don't like this. This is a bad appearance. We don't want we're going to get ready. We're getting ready to try to hire a coach, and we don't want the idea to be out there that we're broke or that we do bad NIL deals or anything like that. So dump that thing.
Yeah.
And this was something that Yurachek created, a deal he made right after that 2023 season in which Arkansas won 4 games. So this was supposed to be an attempt to get more NIL money for Sam Pittman so he could bring guys in through the portal. And I guess it worked reasonably well because he did okay doing that. But I just think that there are people behind the scenes that I still say are controlling what's happening right now. And they don't want it to appear that way. They want it to look like Hunter Yurachek is deciding all of this stuff. But I don't think Hunter Yurachek just suddenly woke up, 2, 3 days ago and went, we're going to get rid of all this. He'd used it for over 2 years. Now we're going to dump it? For what reason? He had already explained apparently that, well, we don't have the same arrangement that Oregon State has. Then all of a sudden we don't have any arrangement. Now, here's one possible explanation beyond that. When I talked to him after that press conference, it was Monday, a week ago last Monday, in which he announced officially that Petrino had the job, he did tell me that he believes that by the start of January and as we get further into 2026, NIL will start getting reduced in importance. It's already supposed to have been more heavily regulated starting in July of this past July. And so what he was saying is there may be some schools still pushing this thing, this NIL thing, trying to get more NIL money, but it's going to be heavily scrutinized fairly soon, certainly by the start of next year, so it won't be as important. So maybe that's also why they did this. We don't really need Edge anymore, but they're still going to need some kind of an NIL program, even if it's not as elaborate as this one. So something else is still going to be announced. I just think, once again, there are just signs everywhere we look that Hunter Yurachek may look like he's running everything, but I think there are people behind the scenes that are kind of pulling the chains and pushing the buttons and saying, okay, we're going to do this, and he's announcing it.
Yeah, and there's an interesting reality to this. We did a story on Arkansas Edge about a year and a half ago which I found interesting. I sat down with their former executive director, who was Chris Bauer at the time. He ended up leaving a couple months later, and everybody knew the idea of what Arkansas Edge was going to be, right? It's the NIL collective for the University of Arkansas. We know their goal is to raise money, but the question we had was how? How are you going to do this? How are you going to go out and try to get people and average Joes who spend their money on Razorback tickets to spend their money on the NIL collectives? And they didn't really give us a great answer. We walked in at an interview with probably more questions than we did answers, and that's never a good thing. And again, with how gray NIL is in college athletics right now, you could go into the gray area, which Hunter Yurchek alluded to at Little Rock Touchdown Club, but Arkansas never did. And it felt like, to me, there was never a great plan for Arkansas Edge to succeed. That you needed to raise the money. How are you going to do that? How are you going to think of the third-party ideas to be able to go and interact with the community? Because quite frankly, your biggest supporters are the students down the street who live all throughout campus. And if those kids won't spend money, because as a college student 2 years ago, heck, I wouldn't give more than $10 to the university, if that. Like, I had trouble even buying food at concession stands because it was $10, $12. So how are you going to get those kids to do that? So you lose out on all of the students and all the money that they can make. Then you think, okay, parents and people who are long time in the state, well, a lot of them can't afford to give up $20 a month to be an Arkansas Edge member. 20 times 12, what is that, 140 give or take? So 100,040 a year. I don't know. My math is bad, guys. I don't do math. That's why I'm here talking sports with Mike. But if that's $1,400 a year that you're spending on Arkansas Edge, that might mean that they can't afford other things that are more important in life. Right. So the third-party ways to find revenue for Arkansas Edge really was the reason it was never successful. And it was always, to me, it just felt like it was set up to fail.
Well, it didn't work as well as it did at some schools. Yeah. But a point has been made by more than just people like Yurchek. I mean, there have been people in the media that have looked at this and said, well, Arkansas is not the worst. Mm-hmm. They don't have the worst NIL situation in the SEC, but they're certainly not at the top. Mm-hmm. And so I think what you have the average fan saying, well, if we're not near the top, how are we ever going to get there? And that's what they're concerned about. But again, we keep getting these conflicting messages because Yurchek has also said they have plenty of money to hire the next head coach, hire his staff, hire his support staff, and provide him with what he needs to be successful. Well, where is that money going to come from? It's got to come from money. Maybe it's not NIL, but it's got to be money donated maybe to the foundation that goes into the athletic department's coffers, and they still use that to pay. Because, I mean, you've always paid coaches that way. A head coach has always gotten most of his money not from the university, but from the foundation, the Razorback Foundation. They're the ones that supply most of the money. So we'll see how that works out. But again, I just can't emphasize enough that if you followed this going all the way back almost a month ago, it's just very confusing. It's like, we don't have enough money. Yeah, we've got plenty of money. Now we don't really have enough. Well, we do, we don't. We do, we don't.
It's the contradicting statements that I think all Hog fans can say that they've been annoyed about over the last couple of months, especially when it comes to Arkansas football. Because how can you have enough money in one sector but not have enough in the other? How can you say you have enough and not have enough? Like, at the end of the day, what's going to happen in a couple months from now when you're getting ready, and I'm just using this as an example, do not freak out at home, to pay Rhett Lashley to come here, and you think you have the money, and then at the 12th hour, it ends up you don't have the money. He stays in Dallas. Then you've got to go and hire another coach who wasn't the number one option, so whoever that number two option was, and then the fan base is going to be mad. So, like, either way, the fan base won't be happy one way or another, but, like, I think to your point, that's a real scenario that could happen that, again, in a later date, it'll be announced, but there's no way you're going to find that out from the university, but they have to be ready for that idea that, hey, maybe, can we believe it? Do we not believe it? We don't know.
I've been told that if they're going after the coach they want, say it's Lashley, mm-hmm. that there are boosters willing to give enough money to get him specific. They're not going to give it to get somebody they don't want. Right. And this has always been the problem. You've got a bunch of boosters behind the scenes. They don't all agree on who they want. Mm-hmm. I want Lashley. I don't want Lashley. I want this guy. And so I'll give money for this guy. I won't give money for that guy. Right. So, I keep telling people, there's a lot of speculation. You get on the internet, fans are speculating, talking about who they want, what they think's happening or whatever. unless you know these people and know what conversations they're having, you don't know what's going on. I admit, I don't know. I've had people tell me, but I've heard conflicting things.
Yeah.
And so I think if it were just up to me, if I'm a fan, I just sit back and wait and see what happens, because I don't care until they get ready to make the real announcement. But there are people that live and die. Every morning you got to get up and you got to feed the internet. It's got a big appetite. Feed me information. And they don't like that. They don't like people talking about things they consider irrelevant. I was answering some questions on Twitter the other day, or X, and it had more to do with what went on with Malzahn and why he ended up leaving and all that stuff that happened in 2006. And some guy was very angry and he said, Mike, stop talking about things that don't matter. All I was doing was answering a question from people that it did matter.
Yeah.
And that's my whole point. What matters to you may not matter to the next guy, to the next guy, to the next guy, but they all want to be fed. And you're just not going to get what you want. You're not going to really know what's happening until we get toward the end of the season.
Right, and all those names start to get reported, yada, yada, yada. Really quickly before we go to a break, again, NIL Arkansas Edge is done. Curious revenue sharing, right? Like we've talked about this, we've hammered it home. How important, again, do you think revenue sharing is now, especially that Arkansas Edge and NIL are maybe starting to phase out here at Fayetteville?
I mean, it's everything.
Yeah.
If you can't meet the cap, you're in trouble. So, but I'm assuming that most SEC teams will meet the cap. Now, we had discussed earlier, months ago, that Arkansas might be having trouble meeting that cap. Your check had even indicated that. Now they're saying, no. That's just one more bit of information where you go, we don't have enough, we might not be able to. I mean, this is one of the reasons that your check started laying people off, like Kevin Trainer. We got a different budget now. We're going to have to cut back so we can make these revenue sharing payments. So has he cut back enough? Have contributions suddenly started flowing in? What? Your coach got fired. You didn't have a good season. Are people suddenly going to start giving money? I think they will if you get a coach that wins. Now, one thing that would help is if they win this game on Saturday, or sometime in the next 3 or 4 weeks they win a couple of games, and maybe win 4 games total. And then you've got to 6 and you go to a bowl game, then I think money will start coming in. People will go, hey, yeah, Petrino really made a difference in this team.
The reality is wins bring in money, right? Like at the end of the day, you look at all the top programs. Why did they get the money they had? Because their teams were winning. What the product on the field leads to the production off the field. But Mike, you alluded to it. Saturday is going to be a really fun game. When we come back from PTN Extra, we're going to be talking about that game with Tennessee and a little bit more on that coaching search. Stick around. PTN Extra returns right after this. Back here on PTN Extra, Evan Camico, Mike Irwin hanging out with you on this beautiful Wednesday in Northwest Arkansas. Mike, I am about 24 hours from leaving and going to Knoxville for the game that everyone's anticipating. If we go back a year ago, let's put ourselves in our shoes of us 1 year ago this week. Arkansas just came off of that game against Tennessee. Sam Pittman, we were saying on air, saved his job. Flash forward 12 months and maybe like 3 or 4 days, Sam Pittman is gone. Bobby Petrino is back in charge. And here we are, but Arkansas hasn't lost to Tennessee since 2007. That was the last game that Arkansas lost to the Volunteers. It was in Knoxville. And here we are, 2025, no more Sam Pittman. Bobby Petrino is back as the head hog. What's your take on this game this week?
I still think it's going to be a very difficult game to win. Arkansas doesn't match up very well against them. They're a high-scoring team. They run the ball well. They throw the ball well. Arkansas defensively has not shown that it can stop the pass, has not shown that it can stop the run. And it's very concerning that the offensive production has dropped off. And I've talked earlier about how Tennessee has 21 sacks on the season so far. That would indicate that they're going to come after Taylon Green. Josh Heupel said we have to contain him. Well, they're going to try to contain him by keeping him from going wide. And trapping him in the backfield and sacking him and putting Arkansas in 3rd and long, 2nd and long, 3rd and long situations. And we've seen what that's done over the last 2 games. They've not done very well, and it's gotten progressively worse. So the game, in order for Arkansas to have a chance in this game, obviously the effort has to be much higher than it was. Now, maybe it will be. We'll see, I think, very quickly if it is. The players say they're buying into it more. Practices has changed. The discipline is a little bit different. He's challenged these guys in ways they haven't been challenged under Sam Pittman and the staff that was existing at that time. And there's been 3 changes in the defensive staff. Offensive staff is the same. He's also talked about how that he, now that he's back down on the sidelines, has to avoid yelling too much at the officials. We were just looking at some old video, and somebody made the, look, why is he yelling? They just scored a touchdown. Because that's what he did when he was here before. He yelled all the time. And what he said the other day was, I'm distracting from my play calling when I do that. So he said, I've got to have more discipline. So are we going to have the best of the old Bobby Petrino, which is the discipline, get you into the game prepared and all of that, but maybe not have some of the problems that he had before where he would start yelling and the next thing you know, there's a screw up because he called the wrong play or whatever because he wasn't paying attention to what he was doing.
What I found really interesting is you talk about Bobby Petrino maybe taking a step back from being as aggressive as he used to be is what the players had to say. And Caleb Wooden came out and said, Bobby's come in and introduced, you tap a guy in a helmet for a really good tackle. All 11 guys have to tap the helmet. And I think that's something that, again, we haven't seen. We've talked a lot about team chemistry, and I think the offensive line specifically and what Eric Mateos has done, the fist bumps has been really good, but we haven't seen that on defense. And Wooden went on to say, when things get hard, we have to fall back on the whys. The DB room shared in early January all of their whys. Why do you play football? And one of the reasons is these guys, they want to have fun. They like to have fun. And they said that Bobby wants these guys to have fun. He wants them to enjoy. And I think that's really interesting from what we've seen in the past of under Sam Pittman and Travis Williams, where maybe these guys weren't having that much fun on defense. And clearly when you're giving up 30, 40 points a game, you're not having very much fun. So it's interesting to see the little changes that they're trying to make. And will it go a long way? Let's be real. Probably not. But you never know what's going to happen because any slight change has got to be better than what they have been doing, which is allowing 500-plus yards to opposing teams' offenses seemingly every week since week 3.
And this is a team that's averaging over 500 yards or close to 600 yards. And what do they go to 700 maybe if you give the kind of effort you've been giving. An interesting thing to me, and I pointed it out before, is that you now have 2 defensive coaches, 2 new defensive coaches that both have a background of coaching the defensive line. And there's nobody on that staff right now with a background of coaching linebackers. So Petrino sort of indicated, kind of going through the back door, he made a statement that most defensive coordinators like to coach out of the linebacker spot. So that sort of indicates that his defensive coordinator is now going to be the linebackers coach. And I've heard that both of those guys are going to be coaching a combination of the D-line and the linebackers are going to be in the same meeting room. They're going to try to unify that group because Petrino feels like that's where the breakdowns have taken place. He wants the linebackers to be able to see better. He wants the defensive linemen to do a better job up front, but they got to coordinate with each other because that's a first line of defense, second line of defense situation, and if they both break down, that's when somebody goes 50 on you. So it'll be interesting to see if they work it that way.
And again, you can use the lack of pressure that the Arkansas defense has been getting on opposing teams. I think they only had 1 sack last weekend against Notre Dame, but by that time, you're down by 40 points. At that point, what's a sack besides something to add in the stat book when you're kind of in garbage time as the whole second half against the Fighting Irish was? So, and you see it in the NFL, right? Micah Parsons, one of the best, defensive end linebackers, and they go from being down low to being in that linebacker core. It should be interchangeable. And what happens when you can't get pressure with 4 guys? You've got to bring more. You're not going to really want to bring a safety or a defensive back, and you're going to rather bring a linebacker on a blitz. So that could be where we've seen that. Maybe it's a good thing. Jay Hayes spent a lot of time, the new defensive line coach in the NFL, 15 years there, was with the Bengals when they had Vontaze Burfict, and even though Vontaze Burfict wasn't a great guy on the field, he was a really good player, even though he stepped on some guys and maybe bit a guy's ear or something or whatever. But, hey, they were still really good when Hayes was there in Cincinnati. So there is a chance that this helps elevate it. And, again, you're just going to need to see a lot more from your defense. Curious for the Arkansas offense, who's the player that you need to see get going, right? Like, take Taylon Green out of the equation right now because that's the obvious answer. What player, specifically maybe wide receivers, let's look there because we're not talking enough about no Jaylen Brown, no Ismail Cisse. You're down another wide receiver. Who do you need to see really step up? Because you're going to think they're going to double team Omega Blake.
Yeah, he's mentioned Crutchfield, who's a guy that from Arkansas. He went to Missouri, didn't play much there, came here, apparently didn't put in a lot of effort in the fall camp, and didn't get used much. But now maybe Petrino is doubling up and saying, we've got to have you now. And then Antonio Jordan, who we talked about a lot because we were talking about the stuff he'd done at the high school level, and all of those long line of receivers from Warren and what they tend to do, especially under Petrino. And yet he got hurt, and he's been out for a while, and now he's back, and he's been challenged to step up. I think what Petrino wants is more options at wide receiver. I mean, that's what we were talking about when the season started, or we approached the start of the season. There's 6 guys they could throw to at any given time. Now it's sort of dwindled down to about 2. And that probably has something to do why their receivers aren't getting open as much anymore.
Also, the tight ends, like we haven't seen a ton. We saw a little bit of Rohan Jones getting worked in the Memphis game, and then he kind of disappeared. Jaden Platt has kind of disappeared. Same with Andres Poshka. He's kind of disappeared. So you're right. Like, you'd like to see the production come back, and maybe that is going to the tight ends a little bit more because of what we saw in glimpses in 2024 of Luke Hasz being really efficient in the Arkansas offense. Obviously, you get hurt, yada, yada, yada. But if they can find that balance and maybe have a tight end step up, maybe a little bit more screens for the wide receivers, just like don't fumble the ball. That's all we could ask for at this point.
I think if the offensive linemen pass block well, I think Tennessee is vulnerable to the pass. They've shown they are. If they can't get to you, if they can't get to your quarterback and you give him time to throw, I believe Arkansas can rack up yards, score touchdowns, and kind of break free of this thing they've had for the last couple of weeks. But that's only if the pass blocking is good and you don't get these sacks, you don't get these quarterback hurries. You give him plenty of time to look downfield and find an open receiver and get the ball to him.
Not to mention as well that obviously being a big key. But it's going to be a really intriguing week. I'm really excited to head out to Knoxville and see what happens, how this team shows up, how this team responds from Sam Pittman. Do we got any guesses on what the score is going to be this weekend?
I think most people feel like if Arkansas is in it, it's going to be a high-scoring game because they're assuming Tennessee's averaging over 50, slightly over 50 a game. So what are you going to hold them to 45?
Yeah.
Well, you still got to score 46 if you're going to win the game. So if Arkansas is successful, I think it's got to be a game in the 40s at least.
I was going to say high 30s because if you look at this Tennessee team in the 2 games they've played in conference, they're 1-1. They ended up beating, they beat Mississippi State. That was an overtime game. They lost to Georgia. That was another overtime game. So they have the ability, I think Arkansas does offensively, to keep it close. And Tennessee's defense has been giving up a lot of points in conference. I think they're averaging like 36, give or take. I think it was like 34 to Mississippi State and 44 to Georgia. So you're going to have a chance to really be there and be competitive. My big thing, Mike, is if Arkansas gets the ball, if they start with it, I don't want a 50-yard field goal by Scott Starzik to open the game. Right. Go down. If it's 4th and short, trust your offense. Go for the kill punch early on. Get the crowd silent. It's what they need to do. Sam Pittman failed of doing that in Oxford. He failed to do it in Memphis. Hopefully, Bobby Petrino learns from those mistakes and at least tries to go for it to show confidence in your offense early on, show confidence in what your team can do, and try to silence this Neyland crowd. Last thing before we go.
Well, I do think that while Pittman didn't get involved in a lot of the X's and O's of the offense, definitely he decided whether you kick a field goal or go for it. And his instincts were almost always wrong, going all the way back to when he was first here. He just never seemed to make the right decisions in critical situations, and it's one of the reasons he's not here anymore.
And it's why they were 7-20 in one-score games under Sam Pittman. But, Mike, that was a lot of fun, and that's going to do it for PTN Extra this week. For Mike Irwin and our amazing production crew, I'm Evan Kamica. We'll see you back here next Wednesday. Enjoy your week, guys.